Star Trek Voyager, Starfleet Academy, The Chance Factor, Chapter 9. The next few seconds unfolded in slow motion for Kathryn as the alien cat raced toward the cliff and easy prey. She could imagine only 3 possible endings to the terrifying situation. Captain Holbrook would beam them out of danger. The cat would turn before grabbing one of them to munch for lunch. Or someone was going to be pushed off the cliff. Thorn and Endar jumped in front of Kathryn, Talor, and John, then crouched to repel the cat's attack. Standing on the edge opposite Kathryn, Talor wrapped her arm around John's shoulder and drew him close. The boy was wide-eyed and frozen with fear. Kathryn picked up a rock and tensed as she focused on the cat. The moment it sprang toward Thorn or Endar, she would launch a counterattack. Together, the 3 of them might be able to fight it off without being ripped to shreds or falling off the cliff.
Why, she wondered, isn't Captain Holbrook initiating an emergency beam-out?
The powerful cat leaped toward Thorn. Thorn raised his hands to grapple with the animal when it struck. But the cat never touched the Klingon. Shrieking in fury, the targ charged and rammed into the cat's side, just as it left the ground. Jep's forward momentum deflected the cat and sent both of them plunging off the ledge in a tangle of snarling fur and fangs. No! Thorn sprang to the edge to peer down. Endar and Talor blinked in dazed surprise. John pulled away from the Vulcan and knelt beside the Klingon. The Betazoid's face twisted in anguish as he closed his eyes and reached out to the falling targ. Kathryn went to stand behind them, placing a comforting hand on the Klingon's broad shoulder. Losing Jup brought the painful memory of Bramble's death flooding back. She blinked back her tears and silently mourned, not just for the little dog that had shared her growing up years, but for the devoted targ. In a tragic way, Kathryn realized sadly, Jup's sacrifice proved that Captain Holbrook was right about the value of animals in non-technological circumstances. The targ had been as effective as a phaser. Agonizing seconds passed before John glanced at Thorn. A deep sorrow glazed the boy's eyes. I can't sense his mind anymore, Thorn. Thorn nodded, his jaw flexing as he struggled to control the pain of his loss. He's dead. John frowned slightly as he stared into Thorn's eyes. Yes, but Jup gave his life to save yours because he loved you. He was not afraid. He died instantly without pain. I felt it. Kathryn stepped back as Thorn met John's gaze and gripped the boy's arms in his massive hands. Jup died. A warrior's death, Thorn. Endar swallowed hard, and his voice trembled. Ambassador Spock once said that one should mourn the loss of life only if that life has been wasted, Talor sighed. Jup died to save everyone else. I honor his courage and loyalty. Kathryn instantly changed her opinion about Talor's potential as a diplomat. The Vulcan girl could not have chosen better words to convey her sympathies to a Klingon. Without speaking, Thorn turned to stare out over the green valley so far below. Then he tilted his head back and emitted a powerful, spine-tingling howl. Fiona screeched and dove to skim the tops of the trees on the distant valley floor as though bidding farewell to a friend. Kathryn eased back off the ledge, leaving Thorn alone to grieve in his own way. Following her back into the clearing, Endar took John aside and sat down with him on the thick moss. Amazed, Kathryn watched as the Tellarian tried to comfort the boy. John had experienced the Targ's death, and surprisingly, Endar seemed to sense that it might have lasting harmful effects if John didn't talk about it. Almost, but not quite, as surprising. The normally withdrawn Betazoid seemed willing to talk. Then Kathryn noticed Talor heading into the trees. Chaka. In their fright during the cat's charge and their despair over Jup's death, they had all forgotten about the sellout. The other animals were tense and upset, but none of them was in danger. Chaka had cried out just before the cat attacked, and he was still missing, either hurt or dead somewhere in the forest. Kathryn ran to help Talor search. I do not think we should split up, Kathryn. Talor scanned the trees, her face a reserved, unemotional mask. Kathryn was not fooled by the Vulcan's outward calm. Talor was frantic with worry. You're right. There could be more of those big cats close by. Let's fan out a little and just keep each other in sight. Nodding, Talor started to walk forward and stopped. Did you hear that? Yes, a whining. Kathryn listened, then pointed to the left. This way. As they turned, the Sellet limped out of the shadows. Chaka! Smiling with open relief and delight, Talor ran to the Sellet's side and laughed as he nuzzled her face. You're all right. His foot's hurt, Kathryn said, coming up beside them. She pretended not to notice the girl's momentary emotional lapse. Quickly composing herself, Talor examined Chaka's foot and pulled out a 4-inch thorn that was embedded in his pad. I have something to seal the wound in my kit. He'll be fine. I'm glad of that, Kathryn said as they walked back toward the clearing with Chaka limping gamely between them. She didn't think she could stand losing another of the team's animals. She'd become fonder of the ugly, bristle-haired Klingon Targ than she realized. When they came out of the woods, Kathryn and Talor found Thorn, Endar, and John, checking all the other animals to make sure they were all right. Why did you howl like that, Thorn? John asked as he fed Rayonica's left head a handful of dried bugs. Her other heads were on watch, nostrils flaring and eyes trained on the woods. It is a Klingon ritual that honors the death of a comrade, Thorn answered. We howl to warn the dead that a warrior is about to arrive. And Jup was a great warrior, Kathryn smiled. I'll miss him. We owe him our lives, Endar said solemnly. Thorn nodded slightly and sighed. I owe him more than that. I have always been afraid that I would disgrace myself when someone close to me died in battle. Kathryn sensed an urgency in the Klingon's confession of his most dreaded fear. By telling them, he was cementing the bond Jup's loss had created among them. Now I know. I can handle it. Drawing another deep breath, Thorn squared his shoulders. But it is more important than ever to complete this mission successfully now. Success will honor Jup's memory. I agree, Kathryn said. But that's not the only reason we have to finish on schedule. We have another problem. John looked at her and squinted. His expression quickly shifted between joy and concern. The beam out! The beam out! Whatever. Hey, the beam out! Whoa! Kathryn glanced at him, suddenly aware that John had been reading her mind. Yes, exactly. We'll make it in time, Endar said confidently. Time isn't what I'm worried about, Kathryn explained.
This planet doesn't really have an ionized atmosphere to prevent using the McMurray's transporters. Captain Holbrook should have beamed all of us out of here the moment that cat attacked.
Everyone stared at her, not understanding the implications.
But he didn't, Kathryn continued. And there's only one explanation I can think of for why we're still here.
Thorne frowned, puzzled.
Why? We've been cut off from the ship.
Chapter 10. We're on our own? John asked. Captain Holbrook doesn't know where we are or anything?
Kathryn nodded. I think so.
It's the only conclusion that makes sense. Chalor sat on the ground, cleaning the Chaka's puncture wound. Yes, Thorne clenched his teeth. Captain Holbrook would not have let Jup die if it could have been avoided. Endar frowned slightly but kept his thoughts to himself. Kathryn couldn't tell if he agreed or disagreed, but his stubborn determination to discount anything Chalor or John or she had to say was wearing on her nerves. We must proceed to the beam-out location as planned. Finishing her first aid on Chaka's paw, Chalor stood up. If Captain Holbrook is unable to monitor us, he doesn't know about the cat's attack or Jup's death. Therefore, he doesn't know that we know we're out of contact with the McMurray. And if the ship doesn't get communications and the transporter's working, John added, the transporter site is where Captain Holbrook will expect to find us. The ship will probably send a shuttle to pick us up, so we'd better be there. Kathryn raised an impressed eyebrow. That's excellent deduction, John. The Betazoid boy blushed with a mischievous smile. Actually, that's what all of you were thinking. You can read our minds now, Chalor asked curiously. Sorry. John wrinkled his nose apologetically. Thorne reacted so strongly when Jup fell, it broke through the block I had or something. I promise I'll try to control myself. Thorne scowled his most menacing Klingon scowl. See that you do. John grinned. Nice try, Thorne, but I know you're not really mad. The Klingon laughed. Ha ha! We must stay in contact when the mission is over, John Brezzi. You will be a valuable ally. Don't you think we should get moving? Endar asked.
Yes, Kathryn said. After we dismantle and load the surveillance probe. We can't abandon the mission just because we've run into some difficulties.
Everyone agreed with that, and they set to work, freeing the mechanism from its hiding place. A flat piece of rock had been fitted into the ledge on top of it. Endar and Thorne pried it loose, exposing the probe so it could be lifted up and out. No one had to risk dangling over the edge of the cliff on a rope. When the device was separated into parts, and the parts stashed in everyone's saddlebags, the team hit the trail again. According to Thorne, they only had to make up 15 minutes to be back on their tight but doable schedule.
That isn't going to be easy,
Kathryn thought, sitting back in her saddle to balance tango as he half slid down a rocky incline. The terrain on the far side of the mountain was rougher and more hazardous than it was on the southern face. Putting the safety of themselves and the animals first, they lost more and more minutes as the afternoon moved steadily toward dusk. They weren't worried about being stranded. A shuttle was sure to be waiting for them. However, if they were late, Captain Holbrook might dispatch a search party to look for them. They would have failed to complete the exercise, and no one was willing to accept failure. Resolved, they pushed on down the mountain into the night. We stop here, Thorne announced, as the tired team rode into a narrow canyon. He beamed his flashlight toward rock walls and surveyed the ground. The rock is smooth, and we can build a fire.
Kathryn looked around and nodded. It was their best bet for a place to camp. They were now 15 minutes ahead of schedule, and the animals had been watered at a small stream an hour back. Sleeping on a smooth rock wouldn't be pleasant, but it would be a lot more comfortable than sleeping on a bed of small stones. A campfire would not only ward off the mountain cold, it would warm their weary spirits, too. Once the animals were unsaddled, rubbed down, and fed, Kathryn and John cleared the area of loose rocks and brush, while Thorn, Endar, and Talor gathered wood for the fire. Scrub pines with bluish needles grew in spots along the base of the walls and in crags up the rock face. Kathryn started as John looked up suddenly. "Run!" Talor shouted from the darkness a short distance down the ravine. The sound of boots pounding against rock echoed off the canyon walls. "What's happening?" Kathryn grabbed a rock and a heavy pine branch to use as weapons. John grabbed a leather bag full of sandbats. "Rats! They're being chased by rats!" "Rats?" Kathryn shuddered. "Or something like that." Without hesitation, John opened the pouch and closed his eyes. 6 quiet, rock-like sandbats came to life instantly and streamed out of the bag on leathery-ribbed wings. Kathryn peered down the canyon. Thorn, Endar, and Talor raced toward them with a pack of giant rat-like creatures snapping at their heels. The air was filled with the sound of frenzied snarls and growls. Ignoring the alien teenagers, the sandbats dive-bombed the vicious rodents. Endar, Thorn, and Talor stopped and turned when they realized the sharp-toothed horde was no longer scrambling around their feet. Flashlights flicked on, and everyone trained the beams on the furious battle. The stubby-tailed rats of Deer 4 jumped at the zooming sandbats, jaws snapping. The bats dove, buzzed, and rose to dive again on wings that were 10 times the size of their small bodies. As the rodents turned tail and ran from the mini monsters battering them in the dark, one of the rats sank its teeth into a wing. "Tisha!" John screamed as a small bat squealed in pain and fright. Kathryn sprang forward, armed only with her rock and pine branch. The team was not going to lose another friend if she could help it. It was hard to see in the dim glow cast by the flashlights, and she hesitated. She didn't want to strike the bat by mistake. The light brightened suddenly as Thorn ran up behind her. The rat was shaking the terrified bat, beating its delicate wings against the ground. Taking careful aim, Kathryn brought the stick down square on the rodent's back. It released the sandbat with a shriek, then whirled to face Kathryn with its needle-sharp teeth bared. "Run or die, rat," Kathryn said evenly. "Those are your only 2 choices." She didn't want to kill the creature if it wasn't absolutely necessary. The rat ran. Thorn quickly stepped up and handed Kathryn the flashlight. The sandbat remained silent and unmoving as he gently picked it up and cradled it in his massive hands. "Is it dead?" Kathryn whispered. "No, I feel the heart beating. Talor will know what to do." Murmuring softly to the injured creature, Thorn hurried back to the others. Endar quickly lit the fire as everyone gathered around the Vulcan. Do all your rock bats have names, John?" John nodded, but he did not take his eyes off Talor and the wounded Tisha. The other 5 sandbats perched on a boulder behind him, looking like rocks sitting on a rock. "The teeth only perforated the wing membrane," Talor said softly. As she finished applying an antiseptic to the bite, the sandbat curled back into a tight ball. "I think it's in shock, though. You must keep it warm." "I will," John sighed as he took Tisha from Talor's hands and held it against his chest.
Thank you, Talor. You're welcome. We'll need more wood to keep the fire going. Endar looked down the dark canyon with a frown. The sandbats will go after those rat things the minute they smell them again, John said. Don't worry, Endar. I won't, Endar almost smiled. At least John's made an impression on the Talarian, Kathryn thought. But he's a boy. Hoping Endar could set aside his culture's condescending and dismissive attitudes towards females was probably too much to ask. By the time Thorn and Endar had stacked enough wood for the night, Kathryn and Talor had finished setting up camp. When Tisha's struggle to join its companions threatened to do more harm than cold? Weird. Anyway, sorry. John put it on the rock with the other sandbats. All 6 of them immediately scooted closer to the fire, and the team settled down to eat. How come you didn't let them out of their bag before? Thorn asked. John shrugged. They like privacy and were happier in the bag. Now they have a good reason to be out. They will guard us from the rats all night. Swallowing the last of his Delton pudding, John cocked his head toward Kathryn. What does tango mean? Kathryn sat back slightly. Actually, it doesn't mean anything. The tango is an ancient earth dance. A sacred ritual, Thorn stated solemnly. Not exactly. We do it for fun. Fun? Thorn faked a shocked expression. I did not know you serious Starfleet people did anything just because it's fun. Vulcans do not, Talor emphatically corrected him. Talarians dance only to honor the dead, Endar said. Kathryn blinked. She had never thought of Klingons doing anything for fun either. What do Klingons do? Many things. Thorn licked his fingers, then tossed his empty flash pack in the fire. Personally, I like Klingon opera, but I'm curious about this Earth dance. You must show us. I've heard Klingon opera, Kathryn. A slight grimace disrupted Talor's calm expression. A demonstration of this tango would be infinitely preferable. It was another cultural gap Kathryn had an opportunity to bridge, but not at the expense of her dignity. Recalling another of her father's archaic sayings, she begged off. I'm afraid it takes 2 to tango. I'll tango with you. John jumped to his feet, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. I am not a very good dancer, Kathryn said desperately. I don't think I am either, John laughed. I've never tried. Come on, Kathryn, Thorn prodded. We have the probe, and we're ahead of schedule. We should do something to celebrate. Sighing, Kathryn stood up and brushed the dust off her uniform. She suspected Thorn wanted something to distract him from thinking about Jubb. And now that John had come out of his shell, she did not feel comfortable rejecting his efforts to be sociable. Not even if it meant making a fool of herself for a few minutes. Clasping the younger boy's right hand in her left, Kathryn positioned her other hand on his waist and hit his hand on hers. Then she bestowed her own most menacing glare on their audience. I'll get my revenge on the first one who laughs. They all made an effort to look suitably grim. Ready? Kathryn smiled at John, then turned sideways and straightened her arm. Singing the rhythm, she steered the awkward boy forward with dramatic sweeping steps, then reversed their position and swooped back. Da-da-da-da-da, Da-da-da-da. Do-do-do-do. Da-da-da-da. Is all I want to say to you. Within seconds, Talora was tapping her foot, and Thorn was bellowing along in a grating baritone voice. Fiona and Chaka watched in animal bewilderment. Endar collapsed in a heap of uncontrollable amused laughter that sent Foos scurrying into his hair. As soon as John got the hang of the movements, he began singing the rhythmic tune, too. Self-conscious but delighted that everyone was enjoying themselves, Kathryn threw herself into the dance. She dipped, paused, and turned with an increasing energy that John matched stride for stride. She was taken totally by surprise when she stumbled over a rock on the edge of the campsite. John let go as she lost her balance and fell backward in the dirt. "Are you all right, Kathryn?" Kathryn did not move or answer. Her fall had aroused a snake sleeping by the rocks. 2 feet to her right, the wedge-shaped head of the coiled reptile swayed, poised to strike. Venom dripped from its lethal fangs. John backed up slowly. Realizing something was wrong, Talora, Endar, and Thorn stood up. They hesitated when the boy motioned them to be quiet and still. "What's going on?" Endar whispered. "A snake," John hissed softly. Kathryn did not dare move her head. She didn't dare twitch for fear the slightest movement would prompt the snake to attack. But out of the corner of her eye, she saw the Talarian edge closer and stooped to place Foos on the ground. The huge black spider crept forward. Kathryn's blood turned cold. The snake's venom might kill her in seconds. But another danger was moving toward her on 8 black 9-inch legs. The Talarian hook spider's poisonous bite was fatal too. Had Endar sent Foos to save her, or to make sure the Talarians had one less Starfleet officer to worry about in the future?